September 24th, 1943. Dawn breaks over the Dnieper River. A cold fog hangs low over the water, clinging to the reeds and broken trees along the eastern bank. Somewhere in the mist, an engine growls deep, metallic, hungry, then another, and another, until the river itself seems to vibrate. Red Army artillery opens fire. The earth shakes, the sky flashes white, and thousands of Soviet soldiers rise from their trenches and begin running toward the widest river in Europe. You can almost feel the chill in their boots as they sprint toward the water. You can hear the slap of canvas boats being dragged over mud, the shouted orders, the curses, the prayers. On the far bank, German machine guns wake up. For Adolf Hitler, the Dnieper was not just a river. It was destiny. A natural fortress, a line drawn by geography itself, 2,000 kilometers of deep water, steep cliffs, and fortified high ground stretching from Smolensk to the Black Sea. Hitler called it the Ostwall, the Eastern Wall. In his mind, it would be Germany's shield, the barrier that would finally stop the Red Army. "This is where the Bolsheviks will break," he told his generals. They were ordered to hold it at all costs. No retreat, no withdrawal, no discussion. The Führer had spoken. 3 months earlier, the German Sixth Army had been erased at Stalingrad. Over 250,000 men lost. The first time an entire German field army had vanished from the map. The shockwaves rippled through every Châteaubriant and Châteaubriant RTE from Berlin to Kharkov. Yet even after that catastrophe, Hitler refused to accept reality. Instead, he doubled down. He ordered the Wehrmacht to fall back behind the Dnieper and turn the river into a killing ground. Panzer divisions were positioned along the high western banks. Anti-tank guns were dug into cliffs. Infantry divisions were stretched thin but ordered to hold every meter of shoreline. To Hitler, the Dnieper was a gift from nature. To his generals, it was a gamble. To the Red Army, it was a challenge. In Moscow, Joseph Stalin studied the maps in silence. The Dnieper cut across Ukraine like a steel blade. It was wide, deep, fast-moving, in many places over a kilometer across. The western bank rose sharply, giving German gunners perfect fields of fire. Any crossing would be a bloodbath. But Stalin wanted speed. He wanted momentum. He wanted to finish what Stalingrad had begun. Marshal Georgy Zhukov and General Nikolai Vatutin were given their orders: pursue the Germans without pause. Do not allow them time to fortify. Do not allow them to rest. Do not allow them to breathe. The Red Army would cross the Dnieper on the move. No bridges, no preparations. Just men, boats, and steel. On the eastern bank, Soviet infantry units assembled in the dark. Many had marched for weeks without rest. Their boots were worn through, their uniforms stiff with dried mud and blood, their faces hollow with exhaustion. But they had tanks now. Thousands of them. The factories of the Urals had been vomiting T-34s onto the front lines at a rate Germany could no longer match. Entire tank armies rolled westward like steel avalanches. Behind them came Katyusha rocket batteries, artillery brigades, and waves of rifle divisions. The Red Army of 1943 was not the Red Army of 1941. This one was hardened. This one had learned. This one was angry. At first light, the assault begins. Soviet artillery hammers the German positions along the western bank. Shells tear through bunkers. Machine gun nests vanish in clouds of dirt and smoke. The cliffs erupt in fire. Then the boats push off. Wooden rafts, fishing skiffs, makeshift pontoons built from doors and barrels, anything that floats. German gunners open fire. Tracer rounds stitch the river's surface. Mortar shells detonate among the boats, throwing men into the water. Bodies drift downstream, caught in the current. Still they come. Men paddle with rifle stocks. Others swim, dragging ammunition crates behind them. Officers stand upright in the boats, shouting orders through the chaos. T-34s roll down the eastern bank and fire point-blank across the river, their shells smashing into German bunkers. The river becomes a battlefield. From his headquarters in East Prussia, Hitler receives the first reports. Soviet probing attacks. Enemy attempting local crossings. Situation under control. He believes them. He wants to believe them. The Dnieper is too wide, he insists, too fast, too exposed. No army could cross it under fire. The Red Army will bleed itself dry against his wall. To his generals, he says, they are throwing themselves into the river. Let them drown. But they do not drown. They land. On dozens of points along the river, Soviet infantry claw their way onto the western bank. They dig with their hands, with bayonets, with helmets. They build foxholes in the chalk cliffs while German artillery pounds them. Some bridgeheads are wiped out. Others hold. And then the tanks begin to arrive. Engineer units throw pontoon bridges across the river under fire. Smoke screens blanket the crossing points. Within days, entire tank corps are rolling onto the western bank. German panzer divisions counterattack. They fail. The Red Army does not retreat. It keeps coming. By early October, the German defensive line is cracking. The so-called Eastern Wall exists mostly on paper. Many positions were never fully built. Concrete never arrived. Steel never arrived. Labor never arrived. What arrived was the Red Army. At Kiev, Soviet forces punch through German lines and liberate the city. At Dnipropetrovsk, armored spearheads smash through exhausted infantry divisions. Along 1,000 kilometers of front, German units are being pushed back step by step. The Wehrmacht is running out of men, running out of fuel, running out of time. Hitler receives another report. This one is different. Soviet tank armies operating west of the Dnieper. Multiple bridgeheads linked. Front line no longer continuous. He stares at the map. The red arrows are no longer on the river. They are behind it. His wall has been breached, and it will never be rebuilt. That night in his headquarters, Adolf Hitler erupts in fury. He accuses his generals of cowardice, of betrayal, of incompetence. But beneath the rage is something new. Fear. For the first time since Barbarossa, the Eastern Front is no longer bending. It is breaking. And the Red Army is not stopping. Not at the Dnieper. Not anywhere. As Soviet tank columns roll westward through burning Ukrainian villages, one truth becomes impossible to deny. The war has turned, and Germany will never regain the initiative. The river that was meant to save the Reich has become its grave marker. And Hitler knows it. October 6, 1943, Führerhauptquartier, East Prussia. The room smells of stale tobacco and cold steel. Maps cover the walls. Red pins creep westward like an infection. Telephone lines buzz without pause. Staff officers move quickly, speaking in hushed voices. No one meets Hitler's eyes. He stands rigid at the center of the room, hands clenched behind his back, staring at the Dnieper. Or rather, where the Dnieper used to matter. The morning briefing begins. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, commander of Army Group South, appears on the line. His voice is calm, professional, but exhausted. Main Führer, Soviet tank armies have broken through near Kremenchug and Cherkasy. The 8th Army is in danger of encirclement. We must withdraw to avoid collapse. Withdraw. The word hits the room like a gunshot. Hitler's face tightens. There will be no withdrawal, he snaps. The Dnieper is to be held, every meter, The enemy must be bled white. Manstein pauses. Then quietly, the river line no longer exists. Silence. The kind that makes men hold their breath. Hitler turns slowly. What do you mean, it no longer exists? Manstein chooses his words carefully. The Soviets have established multiple bridgeheads. They have linked them. Entire tank armies are operating west of the river. Our reserves are insufficient to contain them. Hitler slams his fist onto the map table. You promised me the Dnieper could be held. Manstein does not respond. Because both men know the truth. It never could have been. On the front lines, the illusion of the Eastern Wall is dying in fire. South of Kiev, German infantry divisions cling to shattered villages and tree lines. Their trenches are shallow. Their ammunition is low. Their anti-tank guns are worn smooth from firing. They hear the engines before they see them. A distant rumble. Then dust on the horizon. Then the silhouettes. T-34s. Dozens, hundreds. They come in waves, advancing behind rolling artillery barrages. Soviet infantry follow close behind, riding on the tanks, leaping off to clear bunkers and gun pits. German machine guns open fire. The tanks do not slow. Panzerfaust teams crawl forward trying to get close enough for a shot. Some succeed. A tank erupts in flame. The crew bails out burning. Then another T-34 crushes the position beneath its tracks. There is no pause. No regroup. No mercy. A German lieutenant scribbles in his diary near Poltava. The Russians attack without rest. They do not stop at night. They do not stop in the rain. They do not stop when we counterattack. They simply replace the dead and come again. This is not the Red Army of 1941. This is an army that has learned how to kill. At Kremenchug, Soviet engineers complete a pontoon bridge under continuous air attack. Stuka dive bombers scream down through the clouds, dropping bombs into the river. The bridge collapses and is rebuilt within hours. Truck convoys roar across it. Artillery follows. Then tanks. The bridgehead becomes a highway. And the flood pours through. German panzer divisions attempt to counterattack. The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf moves into position and strikes a Soviet spearhead near Kryvyi Rog. For a brief moment, German crews believe they can still turn the tide. They knock out dozens of tanks. Then Soviet reserves arrive. Fresh brigades. Fresh fuel. Fresh ammunition. The German attack stalls. Then collapses. Totenkopf pulls back, leaving burning wrecks scattered across the fields. In Berlin, propaganda broadcasts insist the Dnieper line is holding. The people are told that the Bolsheviks have been stopped, that the Reich stands firm. At the front, soldiers know better. They can see the truth in the sky. The Luftwaffe is gone. Where German fighters once ruled, now Soviet Il-2 Sturmovix roam freely, hunting trucks and artillery. Red stars fill the air. German columns move only at night. Even then they are found. Even then they die. By mid-October, entire German divisions are dissolving. Some retreat in order. Others break. Supply columns clog the roads. Horse-drawn wagons mix with tanks and ambulances. Refugees stream west, dragging their lives behind them in carts. The Wehrmacht that once marched into the Soviet Union like a conqueror is now fleeing it like a defeated army. And still Hitler refuses to authorize a general withdrawal. He orders stand-fast commands. He replaces generals. He threatens courts-martial. He demands miracles. The front gives him none. In a bunker outside Zhytomyr, a German colonel listens to a field radio. Soviet breakthrough reported north of Fastov. Soviet armored forces sighted near Berdyshev. Enemy advancing on Vinnytsia. Each message comes closer. Each one tightens the noose. He looks at his men. Teenagers. Old veterans. Faces hollow with fatigue. He knows they cannot stop what is coming. But orders are orders. And so they wait. In trenches carved into frozen earth. In barns converted into strongpoints. In forests that will soon be burning. They wait for the engines. For the artillery. For the Red Army. Back in East Prussia, Hitler retreats into isolation. He refuses to see Manstein. He refuses to hear more reports. Instead, he rants about treachery. About weak commanders. About betrayal from within. Yet deep down, he understands what the maps are telling him. The Dnieper has failed. The Ostwall has failed. The Reich is bleeding. And the bleeding will not stop. On October 20th, Soviet forces captured Dnipropetrovsk. On October 23rd, they break through near Melitopol. On October 24th, they threaten the rear of Army Group South. The front is no longer a line. It is a collapse in slow motion. As Soviet tank columns race through the Ukrainian steppe, their crews paint new slogans on their turrets. To Berlin. The destination is no longer a dream. It is a direction. And for the first time, even Hitler can see it on the map. November 3, 1943, Kiev. The city burns in the early morning darkness. Smoke rises from shattered apartment blocks. The smell of cordite and wet brick hangs in the air. Broken tram lines snake across the streets like dead wires. Somewhere, a church bell rings, cracked, uneven, stubbornly alive. And then the tanks appear. T-34s roll through the western suburbs, their tracks grinding over rubble and glass. Infantry follow behind them, moving from doorway to doorway, rifles raised. Red flags flutter from shattered windows. Kiev is free. For the first time in 2 years, the city is no longer under German rule. For Adolf Hitler, the loss of Kiev is not just another defeat. It is a wound. A symbolic one. Kiev had been the jewel of the Eastern Campaign in 1941, the site of one of the Wehrmacht's greatest encirclements. Over 600,000 Soviet troops captured, an entire front destroyed. Now the city is gone, and the men who took it are still advancing. At Führer headquarters, the news arrives before dawn. Hitler sits alone in his study when the report is handed to him. Kiev fallen to Soviet forces, enemy armored units advancing west. He reads it twice, then slowly lowers the paper. For a moment, he says nothing. Then, this is impossible. But it is not. The impossible has become routine. The Red Army does not pause to celebrate. Marshal Nikolai Vadutin's First Ukrainian Front drives westward without delay. The momentum is too precious to waste. Soviet tank armies surge through the gap, racing for the rail hubs and road junctions beyond the city. German rearguards fight desperately to slow them. They fail. Villages change hands in hours. Fields become graveyards of burned vehicles. The front moves faster than the maps can be updated. South of Kiev, German panzer divisions attempt one last coordinated counterstroke. Field Marshal Manstein scrapes together what remains of his armored reserves. The 1st Panzer Division, Das Reich and Leibstandart. Veterans. Elite formations. The best Germany has left. They strike toward Fastov, aiming to cut off the Soviet spearheads. For a moment it works. German Tigers smash into Soviet tank columns. Long-barreled 88mm guns punch through T-34s at extreme range. The battlefield fills with burning wrecks. Soviet units pull back. German commanders breathe again. Maybe the front can still be stabilized. Maybe. Then the Red Army responds. Fresh tank brigades roll in from the east. Guards' rifle divisions flood into the gap. Katyusha batteries unleash barrages that turn the sky red. The Germans are outnumbered, outgunned, outproduced. Their counterattack stalls, then collapses. Once again, the Red Army surges forward. At the same time, far to the south, Soviet forces break through near the Black Sea. The German 17th Army in Crimea is now cut off. The Wehrmacht is losing not just ground, but entire theaters. The front is unraveling. Hitler demands explanations. He demands scapegoats. He dismisses generals. He shuffles commands. He promotes officers who promise loyalty over competence. But the problem is not leadership. It is reality. Germany no longer has the men, the fuel, or the factories to match the Soviet war machine. And the Soviet war machine is now in full motion. In the Reich Chancellery, Joseph Goebbels watches the situation with growing dread. Privately, he tells his diary, "The Führer still believes in miracles, but miracles no longer come." The German people are beginning to sense it too. Letters from the front speak of endless retreats, of overpowering enemy numbers, of lost comrades and lost hope. The myth of invincibility is gone. Only fear remains. In late November, Soviet tank armies reach Zhytomyr. In early December, they threaten Berdyshev. The distances grow shorter. The time between disasters grows smaller. The Eastern Front is no longer a battlefield. It is a conveyor belt of defeat. On December 4th, Hitler finally authorizes a limited withdrawal. Not a retreat, a shortening of the line. The language matters. It always has. But for the men on the ground, it changes nothing. They are still falling back, still burning their own supply dumps, still abandoning towns they were ordered to hold forever. Near Koreston, a German sergeant watches his unit march west. Snow begins to fall. He turns back for one last look at the road they came from. There are no columns behind them, no reinforcements, only smoke, only silence, only the distant thunder of Soviet artillery. For the Red Army, the crossing of the Dnieper was more than a victory. It was a declaration. The river had been Germany's last natural shield. It had failed. Now there was nothing left between the Soviets and the heart of Europe. No wall, no river, no miracle, only road. And as Soviet troops dig in for the winter west of the Dnieper, one truth is undeniable. The war has entered its final act, and Adolf Hitler has lost control of it. December 12, 1943, Wolfschanz, East Prussia. Snow drifts against the concrete walls of Hitler's headquarters. Pine trees creak in the wind. The forest is silent, heavy, watchful. Inside the bunker, the war is coming apart. The Situation Room is lit by harsh electric lamps. Cigarette smoke hangs thick in the air. Officers cluster around the maps, murmuring in low voices. The red arrows now stretch deep into Ukraine, pointing west like accusations. Hitler enters without a word. He looks thinner, more rigid. His left hand trembles slightly as he grips the edge of the table. Field Marshal Manstein stands waiting. So does General Kurt Zeitzler, chief of the General Staff. They already know what is coming. Hitler points at the map. Here, and here. His finger traces the Soviet breakthroughs. These are not defeats. These are temporary setbacks. The enemy is overextended. Their supply lines are thin. They are vulnerable. No one responds. Manstein finally speaks. Main Fuhre, the Red Army has built railheads behind every advance. Their logistics are stronger now than ours. They are not overextended. They are prepared. Hitler turns sharply. You always see problems, Manstein, never solutions. Manstein does not argue. He has learned that facts are no longer welcome here. Hitler launches into a monologue. He speaks of secret weapons, of new tank models, of jet aircraft, of a turning point that will come if only the army holds a little longer. The enemy will break themselves against us, he says, just as they did at Verdun. But this is not Verdun, and everyone in the room knows it. Outside the bunker, couriers run through the snow with dispatches from the front. Each one is worse than the last. Soviet forces push toward Vinnytsia. Soviet armor breaks through near Cherkasy. German divisions are at half strength. Some are less. The Red Army attacks day and night. There is no pause. No winter lull. No breathing space. In Ukraine, the front is a rolling storm. Snow mixes with ash. Frozen corpses lie half buried along the roads. Abandoned trucks stand where their fuel ran out. German columns retreat through white fields, stained black with oil and blood. Soviet artillery follows them like thunder. At the town of Radimischl, German infantry dig into frozen ground. Their shovels bounce off ice. They use grenades to break the earth. The Soviets attack at dawn. Katyushas scream overhead. T-34s advance through the snow. The Germans fire until their barrels glow. Then they fall back. Again. A young corporal from Bavaria writes to his mother. We are always moving, always retreating. The Russians never stop. They do not freeze, they do not tire, they only come closer. Hitler refuses to read such letters. He reads only reports that tell him what he wants to hear. Isolated successes. Local counterattacks. Enemy losses. He constructs a war that exists only on paper. A war where Germany is still in control. In January 1944, the Red Army launches a new offensive. This one is massive. 4 Ukrainian fronts attack simultaneously. Over 2 million men. Thousands of tanks. Endless artillery. The ground shakes for days. German lines shatter. Entire corps are pushed back in disarray. At Cherkasy, a German force of over 50,000 men is encircled. Hitler orders them to hold. He promises relief. The relief never comes. They break out through snow and fire, leaving thousands dead behind them. Another army is almost lost. At headquarters, Manstein demands freedom of maneuver. He argues for elastic defense, for mobile withdrawals, for saving the army. Hitler explodes. He accuses Manstein of defeatism, of lacking faith, of disobedience. On March 30th, 1944, he dismisses him. One of Germany's greatest commanders is sent home. The Führer wants generals who will obey, not generals who will think. The message to the army is clear. Hold or die. Meanwhile, Soviet forces reach the Bug River. Then the Dniester. The borders of pre-war Poland come into sight. The Red Army is now approaching the Reich itself. The men paint new words on their tanks. Onward to Berlin. Hitler still speaks of victory. He still believes in miracles. But the front tells a different story. The Dnieper was meant to be the wall, the shield, the line that would save Germany. Instead, it became the doorway through which the Red Army walked into Europe. And now there is no river left to hide behind. Only open land. And a war that is no longer winnable. In the silence of the Wolfschanz forest, as snow piles against the bunkers, Adolf Hitler stares at maps that no longer obey him. And for the first time, even he begins to understand. This war will not end on Germany's terms. February 18, 1944, Western Ukraine. The night is cold enough to crack metal. Snow crunches under boots. Engines cough in the darkness, kept running so they will not freeze solid. A Soviet tank crew huddles around a small fire, heating black bread and rubbing their hands together. Then the order comes. Engines roar to life. The offensive resumes. The Red Army no longer thinks in terms of rivers and lines. It thinks in distances, in road junctions, in rail hubs, in cities that must be taken to keep the enemy running. Their doctrine has changed. Break through, exploit, encircle, destroy, then move again. Always move. Marshal Ivan Konev's Second Ukrainian Front launches an armored thrust toward Uman. Thousands of tanks and self-propelled guns surge forward behind a rolling artillery barrage that turns the horizon into flame. German defenses collapse in hours. Infantry divisions are overrun. Panzer units are forced into desperate rearguard actions. The front does not bend. It dissolves. In Berlin, air raid sirens wail almost nightly now. British and American bombers pound the Reich from the west. Cities burn. Factories vanish. The war comes home. And yet Hitler remains obsessed with the east. Because that is where Germany is dying. Near the town of Kirovograd, German troops attempt to hold a ridgeline. They dig trenches. They lay mines. They prepare for the inevitable. At dawn, Soviet artillery opens fire. The bombardment lasts 40 minutes. Then the tanks come. German anti-tank guns fire until they are silenced. Machine guns are crushed under steel tracks. Within hours, the position is gone. The ridge is red. And the Red Army moves on. Every kilometer west is another memory erased. Another village abandoned. Another unit broken. The Wehrmacht retreats through landscapes it once conquered. Now it can barely defend them. At the Bug River, German engineers blow the bridges. Soviet units cross anyway. They ford. They build new bridges. They advance under fire. The pattern never changes. In March, Soviet forces reach the pre-war Polish border. For the first time since 1941, the war has left Soviet soil behind. The Red Army is now fighting on the land of the Reich's former ally. The psychological weight is immense. For Soviet soldiers, this is vengeance. For German soldiers, it is the end. A German major near Lemberg writes, "We are no longer fighting for victory. We are fighting for survival, and even that is slipping away." The Red Army captures Tarnopol, then Stanislav, then Chernovitz. Romania begins to tremble. Hungary grows nervous. Germany's allies sense the coming storm. In April, Soviet forces reach the Carpathian Mountains, the last natural barrier before Central Europe. But the men who cross the Dnieper no longer fear geography. They have crossed rivers under fire. They have smashed fortified lines. They have broken the Wehrmacht. Mountains will not stop them. Back in East Prussia, Hitler rages. He demands counterattacks that cannot be launched. He orders divisions that no longer exist. He shouts about betrayal, about cowardice, about treason. The walls of the bunker absorb his fury. The war ignores it. The Dnieper had been the moment, the crossing that changed everything. After it, Germany never recovered. After it, the Red Army never slowed. It was the hinge of the war, the door that swung open and could never be closed again. On the front, Soviet soldiers march west through rain and mud. They sing. They carve names into their rifles. They carry photographs of families who died under German occupation. They fight with a memory behind every shot. In one village, an old Ukrainian woman steps out of her house as the tanks roll past. She crosses herself. She kisses a soldier on the cheek. He blushes, then climbs back onto his tank. The war is still ahead. Somewhere far to the west, beyond rivers yet uncrossed and cities yet burned, a distant capital waits. Berlin. The name is whispered now. Not as a dream, as a destination. And every road the Red Army takes now leads there. Type continue to generate the next section. Section 6. The words Hitler never took back. July 20th, 1944. Wolfschanz, East Prussia. The explosion rips through the conference room. Concrete cracks, windows shatter, the table flips into the air, smoke floods the bunker, officers are thrown to the ground, ears ring, blood runs down faces. And Adolf Hitler survives. Barely. When the dust settles, he emerges from the wreckage shaken, burned, and furious. An assassination attempt. By his own officers. The war has come inside the bunker now. But outside, far beyond the pine forests of East Prussia, another force is closing in. The Red Army. Since crossing the Dnieper, it has not stopped. Not in Ukraine. Not in Poland. Not in Belarus. Operation Bagration annihilates Army Group Center. Entire German armies vanish in weeks. Minsk falls. Vilnius falls. The Wehrmacht loses more men in a month than at Stalingrad. The front no longer exists. Only ruins. Hitler tells the nation that Germany will fight on. That Providence has spared him for a reason. That final victory is still possible. But the men at the front know better. They have seen the Red Army. They have felt its weight. They have been buried under its artillery. They have watched its tanks roll past their last defenses. By January 1945, Soviet forces stand on the Oder River, 70 kilometers from Berlin. The distance from the Dnieper to the Oder has taken less than 16 months. The wall that was supposed to save the Reich now feels like a lifetime ago. In the Führer bunker, Hitler stares at maps that show a shrinking Germany. He speaks of holding the capital, of a final stand, of loyalty. But the generals are gone. The armies are gone. The miracles are gone. Only the Red Army remains. And somewhere in the back of his mind, one sentence echoes. The one he spoke in 1943. The Dnieper is unbreakable. History has answered him. April 16, 1945. The Battle of Berlin begins. Soviet artillery turns night into day. 1 million shells fall in 3 hours. The sky burns red. The ground shakes. The final road that began at the Dnieper ends here. On April 30th, Adolf Hitler ends his life. 2 days later, Berlin falls. On May 8th, Germany surrenders. The river that was meant to stop the Red Army only slowed it long enough to gather strength. When it crossed, the war crossed with it. And it never turned back. End.